Right. Thank you so much, Professor Mahmoud. It's a delight to be here today, albeit virtually, for this very important conference on spiritual resurrection. I want to thank the conference organizers, particularly you, Julia Kolb, and the IT staff for all of their help with the logistics of this conference and for helping me pivot to a virtual presentation. This paper will unfold in three parts. The first part of this discussion will be a very cursory introduction to symbols, symbols in the field of religious studies, with a word on symbols in the Quranic context. In the second part of this discussion, I wish to talk about the relationship between symbols and motion, with a particular emphasis on Fatimid eschatological symbols. And in the third and final part of this presentation, I wish to discuss the symbolic forms within the Qiyāma, with particular reference to how I believe this particular kind of realized eschatology can contribute to discussions in the history of religions more broadly. I realize that each one of these sections could be a paper or even a book in its own right, but here we are, and I'm sure we will have a lot to chat about. So here, let me begin this impossibly large discussion with a word on symbols in the history of religions. The author of the entry on symbols in the second edition of the Encyclopedia of Religion, Peter Struck, defines symbol in this way, quote, "In particular, a symbol, as opposed to other forms of signification, tends to be understood as a representational mechanism that renders transcendent realities into tangible forms." He further notes the following, that symbols function to, one, represent something else. This something else must be abstract and general, that this something else serves as a trigger or a locus for sentiment evocation or habit formation. And it is critical to note that this referent is multivalent, or as the definition states, symbol, quote, generally resists direct connection to a single definable referent, end quote. This is in contradiction to a sign. So for instance, when we see stop, the stop sign, that has a singular meaning and is more universally understood. Within theoretical circles in the study of religion, perhaps the most famous theorist of Islamic studies in the history of religions was the American anthropologist of Islam, Clifford Geertz. In the 1960s, his theory of religion was one of the most widely quoted by scholars of religion and actually centered on symbols. Symbols were for him, in fact, the primary building blocks of religion itself. Geertz writes, a religion is one, a system of symbols which acts to, two, establish powerful, persuasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in men, this is the 60s, by three, formulating conceptions of a general order of existence, and four, clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that five, the moods and motivations seem uniquely realistic. And this is from the Interpretation of Cultures. So for Geertz, religion is comprised of symbols, and these symbols instantiate moods and make the world seem as though religion is a seamless aspect of our existence. With that background in place, let's now turn to the Quran. We all know that symbols suffuse the Quranic text. The term ayah, used for verse, is also a major term of signification. The alternation of night and day, the creation of humanity, the regeneration of vegetation in spring, the progression of humanity through various stages, and even the affection created between spouses. These are signs that point to something else. While the term ayah most properly refers to sign, its meaning is that it is a sign, token, or mark by which something else is known, and this is from Lane. The Quran also uses the term mathal to refer to signposting. For instance, in 226, God does not shy from drawing an example, here it's mathalan, even with something as small as a gnat, or larger. And finally, there's the idea of sha'ir, the root shin ain ra, which means to perceive. In its nominal form, it means poet, sha'ir, and symbols, or sha'air, are related to rituals of God. So here there's this valence of proper practice of rituals revealing piety. In fact, Safa and Marwa are described among the symbols, the sha'air of God in Quran 2, 158. Critical to the efficacy of symbols, both in the Quranic context and in the history of religions, is the idea of motion. The gnat, regeneration of life in spring, the sailing of the ships on the sea, these all gain their symbolic traction in the Quran through motion. Moving through the world then and realizing the correct meaning of symbols is itself a primary, if not the primary, message of the Quran. And yet in this world there is a paradox. The symbolic is multivalent. It is only in the spaces of the end of time, the spaces of the other world, that I would posit the true nature of all reality, including symbols, become disclosed. But the space of the other world in the Quran is not a fixed or temporal, not a fixed temporal or spatial abode. The Quranic apocalyptic complex stubbornly resists any kind of fixed space or time. This apocalyptic complex operates across various temporalities and spaces to make its argument, gesturing to present signs, future events, and past histories. The idea of apocalypse in Islam, if we can borrow the term from the Greek as a modality of unveiling, is multitemporal and it is multimodal. It takes place individually as individuals learn to live in concert with the divine will, actualizing their own innate predisposition, fitra, and it takes place collectively, with humans situating themselves at the edges of time to ensure that they remain on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, or the right path. As Christian Langa correctly points out, it is the space of the every when, standing parallel and in tandem with this world. In a sense, then, the Quranic apocalyptic complex defines elements of this world in relation to the next. And in the Quran, the idea of apocalypse, here using the Greek unveiling, or maybe even more appropriately, the Arabic kashf, is the process by which individuals and the collective come to not only recognize, but actualize the divine will as iterated by the Quranic message. The diversity of Islamic thought and praxis can in one way be seen as various interpreters throughout history, shaping discourses of the realities of the symbolized in the Quran and what might be the best ways of getting there. Note that this unveiling of symbols, this kashf, is a process that inherently relies on vertical and horizontal motion. In the Fatimid period, we see how symbols of the end of time acquire a rich multiplicity of symbolic structures and functions. These symbols of the end of time and their dynamic reinterpretations function on a multiplicity of registers to do certain things. I want to highlight here how terms like Qiyāma, Qa'im, and even Barzakh become infused with more interpretive complexities by certain authors to illuminate how sophisticated these symbolic discourses become. So here's a brief tour of some of these terms. I have written elsewhere in the early Fatimid text, the Kitab al-Kashf, for instance, which states that the Yom al-Qiyamah huwa al-Mahdi, the day of resurrection, is the Mahdi, by whom communities of believers or deniers will be judged. The advent of the Mahdi will also emerge as one of the signs of the hour. For Sijistani, the resurrection is decidedly spiritual, as Bustan Hirji and Ismail Poonawalla have noted. The resurrection is not bodily, and there is even an entity that is in charge of event, the pure soul, just as the angel of death is in charge of seizing souls. Alexandrin, following Landolt, argues that this pure soul might also be tethered to humanity's spiritual progress. Landolt suggests that the final eschatological process might even include the cumulative transformation of souls adjoining or even causing this pure soul to appear. Sijistani also reinscribed the term barzakh, the term often correlated with the liminal state in which souls exist prior to final judgment, to mean the successive resurrections on earth undergone by an individual soul. This is quoting from Dacillus. Dacillus has also rightly observed how even the term Qa'im acquires a multiplicity of reference during the time of al-Kirmani. This term Qa'im, most frequently referring to the figure who will rise and rule at the end of time, is often elided with the term Qa'im bil Quwa and Qa'im bil Fi'l, terms often used in philosophical texts to refer to standing in potential or standing in actuality, to refer to the Qa'im in potentiality and the Qa'im in actuality. This revision supported the doctrinal reforms of the Caliph Imam al-Muiz, dies in 975, who argued that, quote, all Fatimid Imams were to be considered manifest embodiments of minor Qa'ims awaiting the final resurrector. And that quote is also from Dacillus. The end of time signals the telos of history in which the collection of souls under authoritative instruction, ta'lim, becomes released through the completion of humanity's 7 cycles. It is a new resurrection driven by the resurrection of souls who are under the guidance of the dawah. This resurrection, in turn, triggers the resurrection of all souls for final judgment. This resurrection looks like the joining of various souls from communities coming together. And as for the space of the garden for Kirmani, it is a space that is closest in description to the divine, the first mover, the entity to which all of creation moves and yearns. In this garden is the righteous. This is the place of refuge of the nexus between the understanding of what is being sent to the natural world and the souls who successfully actualize it through intellection. This is the space of the God-fearing. Now, all of this is to say that Fatimid symbols related to the resurrection, terminology like Qa'im, Barzak, Qiyam, Qa'ima, Qiyāma, were often infused with multivalence whose symbolic and rhetorical force was grounded in a type of motion that gestured to a sense of present or future unveiling. Kashf. History, in other words, was an inexorable part of the unfolding of the symbolic force of the multivalence of the end of time. The unification of souls, the idea of gaining gradations of perfection, the imminent return, this was all tethered to a sense of an unfolding of history, looking to the future, and also a sense of right belief. But what I find most interesting about the declaration of the Qiyāma, as well as the text that discusses its theology, the Haft-bāb, and this is from Badakhshani's translation, is how this particular moment of time is a kind of timeless, motionless space of divine disclosure. Haft-bāb, paragraph 66 says, since in the Qiyāma God is known as manifest, what else remains to be known or hidden? But in the realm of the Sharia, which is imaginary and fanciful, what else remains there which is not imaginary or fanciful? And 67 says, to sum up, it is said that the spiritual world is the human realm. In this context, the prophet says in the Quran, verily the world of the hereafter is life, if only they knew, from Quran 29:64. In another place, he said about the hereafter, all the stones and clods will be speaking. Now, since it is only the human being that can speak, the human face is the specific face of God, the exalted and high. Thus, what else remains in the hereafter that does not appear in this form of the human being? And from 77, if you look carefully, you will find that in the realm of the spirit, the black and white stones are also human beings. The tablet, lawh, the pen, kalam, the throne, arsh, the pedestal, kursi, the trusted spirit, Ruh al-Amin, the Holy Spirit, Ruh al-Quds, the intellect, akal, soul, nafs, and all others that you may reckon. They are all human beings. Since in the hereafter God appears in this form, then what can remain without having this form? In the hereafter, everything is specific and distinguished. One has to lift up his mind from fantasies and imaginings until he is saved from wandering in the darkness and arrives at the lights of the realm of religion. End quote. So the realm of fixity, specification, delineation, and full unveiling of objects as they truly are, this is the actualized space of the Qiyāma. This is the space in which the end of time is actualized without a multiplicity of symbolic forms. As the text quoting from the Quran states, verily the world of the hereafter is life, if only they knew. This is the space in which the multiplicity of the symbolic valences is simply not present, and hence symbols are no more. Everything is simply apparent for all to see in the realm of the resurrection. Why is this elision between symbol and symbolized important? I believe that what we have with the Qiyāma is something new. We have the freezing of eschatological symbols where neither symbol nor symbolized are in motion. In this realm, symbols appear as the true and fixed identity of the reality of all things as they truly are. If that is the case, then I wish to posit that we have a unique specimen in the history of religions in which the worlds of the here and the hereafter are fixed. They meet. They are in a kind of hermetically sealed space in which the only thing that matters is individual perception of true reality. And so I would posit this is the importance of motion in the space or the realm of the Qiyāma. Motion is tethered to individual perception of true reality in a realm of complete divine disclosure. As we all know, salvation is readily apparent in this realm for those who move from the realm of contradiction to the realm of gradation and to the realm of unity. And it's not the multiplicity of symbols that need to be decoded in this time. It is simply recognizing the nature of true reality and acting accordingly that mediates salvation. So I want to offer two concluding reflections on this event. Marshall Hodgson first drew parallels between this event and Pauline theology, the theology of St. Paul the Apostle, many years ago. But like every comparison, the magic is in both similarities and differences. For Paul, time was always moving forward. It was in motion until the second coming of Christ. For Paul, Jesus' death and resurrection triggered the release of the pneuma, or spirit, that readily accessible substrate of salvation for those who believe in Christ. But in the Qiyāma, final time is actualized in the here and now. It is not already, not yet, as Dunn points out. Actualization of the end of time tells us not just about the aspirations of particular symbols in a world gone awry, but actualizes the totality of a vision of a world that is utopian. It is a world that is made right. This is a world that is devoid of chaos. It is devoid of motion except for the motion of perception. This realm of the Qiyāma is a fragile moment of world building in which the world that ought to be is the world that is. And through this, there is peace. All you have to do here is recognize the true identity of the Imam figure. As all eschatological and other symbols become unveiled as living spiritual forms, humanity now has a special opportunity to recognize the highest terrestrial form of itself. At the apex of the system is Allah Dikri as-Salam, the master of the rising, the Qa'im of the Qiyāma, who unveils all things as they truly are. Thank you.